Ole Miss getting a top transfer portal defensive lineman in Chris Hardie puts the SEC on notice for 2024.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about Chris Hardie committing to the Ole Miss Rebels in a move that takes Ole Miss's defense to another level potentially. We talk about Jacory Croskey Merritt enrolling at Arizona per Zach Berry and why that's probably a good thing for Ole Miss football in 2024. We also talk about the House settlement and why it's going to be full of misinformation and how we at Locked On Ole Miss plan to combat that. And the Ole Miss basketball team got a commitment as well as Chris Beard. He actually might be willing to, are about to get another one as well, and that could be his biggest signing. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first and listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. July 2nd at 7 p.m. Central Time, you can join us at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland, Mississippi for a little bit of a meet and greet. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun, and it gives the opportunity for the Loom community to meet up as we grow this together. So we're going to do our first meet and greet in the state of Mississippi at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland on July 2nd. You can join us there. And also the Rebel Road Trip is going to be going on in June, and they're sponsored by Dead Soxy. They'll be in Corinth, Mississippi, June 13th at the Crossroads Arena. Lane Kiffin, Keith Carter, and all of them will be there. I think this might be a good opportunity to get the mayor of Oxford, Tom Vanderford, or mayor of Corinth, I should say, Tom Vanderford, out and about as well. Just thinking out loud. Also, there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. Interesting stuff. Ole Miss got a commitment. We had the show on Friday talking about Chris Hardie getting close to a decision. Well, Chris Hardie decided and he chose Ole Miss. This is a really good player as well. Pete Nakos was kind of the first to do it. He said the Jacksonville State All-Conference USA defensive lineman Chris Hardie will transfer to Ole Miss. The APS or AP Sports Agency tells On3 Sports he tallied 61 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 8.5 sacks in 2023. This is a guy that, if you look at his statistics, those 61 tackles, those 4 quarterback hurries, 8.5 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, believe he led Conference USA in tackles for loss a year ago as well. This is a guy that is performing at a very high level and will fit a major role on this Ole Miss defense. This Ole Miss defense is going to be chock full of defensive linemen this season. They just are. Whenever you look at somebody like Princely Amon-Mielen, who is going to be the alpha dog at defensive end on this defense. You also have a Jared Ivey. And then you have interior guys like Walter Nolan and J.J. Pegues and those guys. And the Xavion Harris, the Akello Stones. This defensive line unit has a chance to be the deepest that Ole Miss has had potentially in my lifetime. I know I say that a lot. I know that you always hear this team has a chance to be the deepest and most talented in my lifetime. Well, that's because it's true. And Chris Hardie adding to this defensive end unit, he is a former track guy. Whenever you look at athletic players, okay, super athletic players, there's video if you go on the Google machines and look at it, of him running a 200 meter in high school. So he was running sprinter level stuff in high school. Now he's 270 pounds now. He's super athletic, and he was the definition of mid-major explosive in his first few years of college. He is going to fit in. And we talked last week about how Pete Goldings can help this player. And over the course of his career, he's been the defensive line whisperer, all the way from Marcus Davenport to Will Anderson at Alabama. And then you look at the Peach Bowl a year ago, Jared Ivey was the MVP of that game. He does a really good job of being able to scheme defensive ends open. And now he has two of the more explosive defensive ends that he's had in recent memory. Whenever you consider Princely Amonmielen and when you consider Chris Hardie, both of those guys can do different stuff. So that's going to add a level of positional versatility to this team. You're going to have a situation where Jared Ivey moves inside. You're going to have one really big defensive lineman and a race car package will develop, because Chris Hardie, I do think, has the ability to be more of a strong side defensive end type defensive lineman. He's not really a jack. He is more of a Marcus Tillman, a more explosive Marcus Tillman than he is a Princely Amonmielen or a DJ Holmes or those guys. This defense just got a whole lot more versatile with the addition of Chris Hardie. And this is essentially it for the transfer portal. Now, there's going to be some players that trickle in. I've heard rumors of another running back, seriously, and we'll tell you why in just a second. And I've heard wide receivers that have visited. They're always going to be looking to opportunistically add players. But if you want to look at the 2024 roster as it's being set up, I think Ole Miss is about 99% of the way done for what is going to be the roster going into this fall. So we'll see exactly what happens. This is a massive massive pickup. And the rest of the SEC, defensive line-wise, when dealing with Ole Miss, just got put on notice. And these offensive lines are going to struggle quite a bit. This is a bigger move than you know. This is a bigger move than you realize. Chris Hardie has a chance to be a plus Isaac Ukwu this year, and the rest of the SEC is going to have to deal with this because the defensive line at Ole Miss has probably reached a level they haven't reached since 1993, 1992, to where they had Jolie Dunn and basically did a lot of work. So I'm pretty excited about what can happen. Now, let's talk about Jacory Croskey Merritt. Jacory Croskey Merritt committed to Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. 189 carries, 1,190 yards, 17 touchdowns, good little running back. When you look at his statistics and everything, though, you're like, hey, this guy is out of eligibility. And rumors started going around to Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago that he was out of eligibility. Rumors went around Arizona that he was out of eligibility when he went to Ole Miss. Now he is going back to Arizona, it appears. This is Jason Shear from Wildcat Report, one of the Arizona sites as well. He says that Jacory Croskey Merritt is letting it be known he is back as an Arizona Wildcat. Big pickup. Also, Zach Berry put out that he is enrolled at Arizona. So, honestly, this makes a little bit of sense when you look at the fact that Ole Miss just recruited Rashad Amos, who has a chance to be a top shelf running back, had a 210 carries a year ago, 1,075 yards, 13 touchdowns. This is a workhorse type running back. And whenever you consider Henry Parrish, when you consider Ulysses Bentley, you can see what they are doing. But whenever Ole Miss got a commitment from Rashad Amos and they had Jacory Croskey Merritt, this didn't make a whole lot of sense, because when you look at all of this running back room, we knew that something had to be going on. Okay. Something had to be happening because of Ole Miss going as much in on running backs as they did. Well, that turns out that Jacory Croskey Merritt, Ole Miss, I think, needed to protect themselves. And not necessarily from Jacory Croskey Merritt or anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. But from the NCAA. Whenever he transferred from Arizona to Ole Miss, I talked about how this is a unique situation and eligibility-wise could be a problem. People at Arizona said this could be a problem. At that point, I started worrying. It's like, okay, Jacory Croskey Merritt is that type running back that on August 20th, Ole Miss would get a cease and desist note, essentially, from the eligibility committee on Jacory Croskey Merritt. to where Ole Miss is down a running back for a football season that is the most important football season that Ole Miss has ever had. Ole Miss had to protect itself. They did that with Rashad Amos, and I think they did that by cutting bait. I can't say for sure that Ole Miss cut bait on this, but I think that Ole Miss might have cut bait on this because of what this season means. This season's so important, they can't afford to even give the NCAA a reason to slap down little old Ole Miss. So I think that might be the situation. Rashad Amos, Dominique Thomas, those running backs got brought in. This running back room is just as effective as it was yesterday, by the way. Even with Jacory Croskey Merritt potentially going to Arizona, this running back room is just as good as it was. And Rashad Amos and Ulysses Bentley IV and Henry Parrish have a chance to be dudes moving forward. And then you got Logan Diggs. When he gets healthy, this running back room could be imperative. But this transfer portal window is basically essentially over. There's going to be stragglers, pieces come in and out over the next couple of weeks, but this roster is 99% done, which means we can start thinking about what this team will look like moving forward. And we're going to be doing, like, when I'm up at the meet and greet, we're going to do 3 shows. That'll be the 3 shows about September games, October games, November games. We're going to do W's and L's. In, I think, June 19th, that week, we'll be doing only 3 shows that week because of family vacation type stuff. So remember, in June and in the first part of July, it could look a little bit different. But as soon as we come back from that Mississippi meet and greet, I think I should be back down here the weekend after July 4th. It's go time at that point. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, recharge, meet some of you guys at the meet and greet, and then we're going to be ready to go, recharge, and let's go. Should be really interesting indeed. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. With the House settlement, there's going to be misinformation absolutely everywhere. So how are we going to combat that to get the real story? We'll tell you about that next. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So really interesting stuff. We got a commitment from Chris Hardie, and I don't know for a fact, but I do know that Ole Miss needed to protect itself with the Jacory Croskey Merritt thing. That was just a weird situation. This whole eligibility thing doesn't make sense because if he wasn't going to be eligible at Ole Miss, he's not going to be eligible at Arizona because the problem isn't GPA or anything like that to where it's kind of a sliding scale. It's kind of like the is she pregnant argument. And the answer is yes or no. And there's no gray area. So it's an interesting situation, and Ole Miss needed to protect itself, I do believe. Now, the House settlement on Friday was announced, and we talked about all of that over and over again. And we did a whole show about what that House settlement could mean. And basically where we're at right now, I think it's a $2.8 billion settlement to where $2.8 billion in damages have to be paid. That's going to be taken out of NCAA tournament number. They're going to take distributions and make them a little bit smaller. And it's going to be part of what gets to about $5 million a year for about 10 years in that. Scholarships are going to have to be added to in certain sports because the scholarship limit is going to go away. The walk-on is going to go away. That is something that is going to come from this settlement as well. And that's going to raise up to another certain amount of money. The big chunk of money will come from revenue sharing. And revenue sharing means that when you get your TV money that gets paid to the school, whenever the SEC gets their money this week from Destin, in the future, I think starting next January, you're going to get a haircut on that amount of about $22 million a year. And that's just going to go on for perpetuity. The $30 million that I talk about, the $300 million over 10 years, that's everything for the 10 years. But the $20 to $22 million, that's never going away again. That doesn't end. And it's only going to go up because after the 10 years, they're going to be able to renegotiate that to where that revenue sharing number is going to go up. But there's a ton of misinformation right now that is floating around. This is from somebody named Carl Reed Jr. He's checkmarked. He's subscribed. I think he does something in NIL space. And it's like 2025 recruiting class, NIL collective promises are no longer valid based on this new rule. This rule goes into effect January 25th. So you better go to where you want to play football because nobody else knows where the revenue split will be. So if you picked a school based on collective money guarantees, things are about to change. That sounds good. That sounds like an opinion that we need to pay attention to. But it immediately comes up, Walker Jones, false. That's not real. So what we're going to do, we have a little bit of a relationship with the Grove Collective, and I have a little bit of a relationship with Walker Jones. Walker Jones has said he is going to come on the show on Tuesday evening, and we're going to talk about this house settlement and what it means. I'm also going to get his top 5 Ole Miss wins of all time, by the way. I'm going to figure out those as well. But we're going to get to the root of this. And I'm sure we could have Keith Carter on here as well. I could probably get him with an email as well. But we're going to start with Walker Jones because there is some language that the NCAA has put out that is very anti-collective. I do not think the NCAA is very pro-collective at all. Now, ADs have to deal with collectives and they have pretty good relationships. I think Keith Carter and Walker Jones have an excellent relationship. But the surrogates that go through, they hear what's going on. There's very anti-collective languages and the pay for play and all that stuff. Well, I don't think collectives are going anywhere. In fact, I heard from several locations that the Grove Collective is not going anywhere. They're going to be equally as important. They're going to be responsible for giving the competitive edge to Ole Miss football. And if the Grove Collective sticks around, I think they have a chance to continue this streak because the Grove Collective is by far one of the better ones in the country. But the rest of the country wants everything to go back to where it was in 2008. And the way that the NCAA can protect these blue blood programs, these Penn States, these Alabamas, these schools like that, is by eliminating stuff that levels the playing field. They want to set the rules in the game to a situation that they can win. They want to put their thumb on the scales, so to speak. But the Grove Collective is not going anywhere. And we're going to talk to him Tuesday night. At least that's the plan, to talk to him Tuesday night about exactly what this means for the Grove Collective. How will this change? How are you preparing for what is going on? They're not going to be moving in-house. So whenever anybody says the Grove Collective is moving in-house, they're not. They're going to be moving outside the realm because the money that goes to the Grove Collective, if they were internal in the athletic department, I think that might be part of revenue sharing, if we're going to be honest, if you want to think about that craziness. But We will talk about what this means. And this is the early stage. So while he might be very prepared for what's going on, he probably doesn't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's probably pretty good for a college football fan if you see this, that collectives and people like that don't have all the answers, because that means they're trying to figure this out. And Walker Jones is going to be acting in the best interest of Ole Miss athletics. And it could mean a ton, just an absolute ton for the athletic department moving forward. So, in summation, from where I sit, like I said, we're going to talk to Walker Jones about this. Through revenue sharing, you're going to have a baseline of the players getting paid. Now, that means that players are going to be dealt with differently on this show and other shows as well. It comes with the fact that you're getting money. The Grove Collective is still going to be important because that's the place where the competitive edge is going to happen. It's not going to be included, but the sole responsibility for paying players is not going to fall on the general fans. And now it's just kind of, hey, what do you want? Do you want to do this? Instead of we have to do this, and should be pretty good. But we'll talk to Walker Jones about what is going on and where he sits as well. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Hey, Ole Miss got a basketball commitment, and they're working on another that might be Chris Beard's biggest signing in his short time in Oxford. We'll talk about that. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find a Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or the free Fire TV channels app. Be part of history. Really interesting stuff. Ole Miss basketball got a commitment from the transfer portal over the weekend. It's Javon Benson. He is a former South Carolina player, ended up going to, I believe, Howard. He averaged 7.2 points and 5.3 rebounds and only 15 minutes per game this season. Good basketball player, is another front court type player. Now, Chris Beard, obviously, when you look at what he has gone through, he saw this season and he said, never again. It is never going to happen this way again. We are not going to be so guard dominant as we are this year. And we're not going to ever be as guard dominant as we were this year. Javon Benson is another front court player. He joins like Malik Dia and those other transfer portal additions that Ole Miss has done. I think Dre Davis as well. This basketball team has a chance, per Jeff Goodman and the Twitterverse, to be one of the top 25 basketball programs going into the season next year. All the expectations in the world will be on the Ole Miss basketball team, and a lot of that has to do with a Javon Benson. Now, by my count, this is where it gets interesting, okay? I think there might be one more spot that's available on the roster for 2024-2025. One more spot that seems like it's being held intentionally just in case. So what I think is about to happen, I'm going to say I think, because while I have a relatively informed opinion on this, it is just an opinion, is I think they're holding that for Matthew Morrell. Now, if you look at Zach Berry, everybody's talking on the boards about the potential of Matthew Morrell going back to school could happen. And Matthew Morrell is one of the better basketball players in the Southeastern Conference if he comes back. Okay? It's not even close. But I think that Chris Beard is holding a spot so that if he wants to, if he can, if this is the way it goes, he would be able to accept Matthew Morrell back into the fold, and with all of the additions that Ole Miss has added. And Matthew Morrell is a super athlete of a player and somebody that can be really, really good this year if he decides to come back to college. The pre-combine, the NBA does this weird pre-combine to where they take players that can go to the combine, and some players go directly to the combine, but there's like 10 spots for 40 players or something like that to get to the combine. Matthew Morrell was invited to that combine this year, and apparently he did not make the full combine. So that means that he's not likely going to be drafted, which means he would have a chance to make a little bit more money if he comes back to school, because Matthew Morrell would be the best player on Ole Miss's basketball team, a basketball team that has a chance to be full of pretty good basketball players. Matthew Morrell, if he comes back to school, if that happens, he needs to work on being the alpha. He needs to work on being the man. He needs to work on taking charge. It's not basketball that's his problem. It's assertiveness that is his problem. Him sharing the basketball and doing all that stuff, he does that with aplomb, and everybody should applaud him for doing that. But Ole Miss needs Matthew Morrell to be the guy, to be the person that whenever Ole Miss needs 2 points, whenever a run is happening against Ole Miss, Matthew Morrell is the guy that you get the ball to because he can stop the run. When Ole Miss has that player, and Ole Miss did at stretches during last season, whether it was Juju Murray, who is back for his senior year, or Alan Flanagan, Ole Miss was a pretty good basketball team. Whenever you could not stop that run, when you could not stop the bleeding, Ole Miss was in problem. It was problematic for Ole Miss last year. Matthew Morrell needs to develop into that guy. He needs to be the 2 or the 3 on Ole Miss's offense. All the point guards around there that is counted on, that is the first option for this Ole Miss basketball team. Whether it's front court or back court, it doesn't matter. The offense needs to go through him, and he needs to have all of the eyeballs of everybody on the other team. If that happens, Ole Miss will have a decently good basketball team in 2025. NCAA tournament, the whole 9 yards. Matthew Morrell coming back to school, if that does indeed happen, would be an absolutely massive get for Chris Beard. Not only in the fact that here's a person that understands exactly what's going on, and a year 1 to year 2 jump with a chance to be a very, very special type player. I'm pretty fired up about what Ole Miss basketball could be next season, and we'll see exactly what happens. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we are the number 1 Ole Miss podcast out there, and thank you for that. This week's top 5 topic is top 5 greatest wins in Ole Miss history. Think about the Notre Dame game, the Florida game, one of the Alabama games. Think about that and where they sit on the pantheon of Ole Miss athletics. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we're going to send you there right now.